For over 3 decades, the United States has pretty much just focused on simply maintaining its aging nuclear weapons. But, as of today, that era is officially over.
Yeah, completely over.
Right. The U.S. is returning to its Manhattan Project roots, essentially launching this massive production-focused mission to entirely rebuild its nuclear arsenal from the ground up. So, welcome to Caught on the Hill, where we break down the most important moments from official U.S. government hearings, briefings, and, public proceedings.
Which is so needed right now.
Exactly. I mean, almost every day, elected officials, agency leaders, and government spokespersons make these statements on the record that really shape the national conversation. But for most people out there, there's simply too much to watch, too much to sort through, and definitely way too little time to follow every single hearing from start to finish.
Right, and that's where this deep dive comes in. Caught on the Hill is to help you quickly understand what happened, what was said, and ultimately why it matters. Everything begins with the actual public proceeding itself, the hearing, the briefing, or the official event where these exchanges took place. From there, we highlight the key moments and try to present them in clear, accessible discussions designed to, cut through the confusion without adding a bunch of partisan noise.
Absolutely. And before we really jump in, just a quick disclosure for you. This audio might sound fully human, but it is created with the assistance of AI tools designed to help make complex public proceedings a little easier to digest.
Right, but it's not just robots running the show.
No, not at all. Even so, this is not an automated process without oversight. Human creators are actively involved in selecting the material, shaping the presentation, and putting real effort into making each deep dive informative, balanced, and, actually worth your time.
Definitely.
So today we're covering the Strategic Forces hearing, specifically the FY27 budget request for nuclear forces and atomic energy. This took place on April 22nd, 2026, in the U.S. House Armed Services Committee.
A really heavy one today.
Oh, incredibly heavy. In this deep dive, we'll walk through the most important exchanges, the central points raised during the hearing, and this massive pivot happening in American defense. Let's begin.
Yeah, and the scale of this pivot, it is just staggering. Just looking at the numbers they presented in the hearing, the National Nuclear Security Administration, the NNSA, they're requesting $32.8 billion for fiscal year 2027.
Wait, $32.8 billion?
Billion, with a B. To put that into perspective for you, that is the 35% increase from the previous year's budget.
Wow, 35% in 1 year.
Exactly. It is a colossal injection of capital into a system that has, fundamentally operated on a completely different, much slower model since the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right, which means we really need to look at why. Why are defense officials demanding this pivot right now? And during the hearing, Dr. Kadlich, who was testifying on U.S. nuclear forces, he laid out a pretty stark message. He called the current geopolitical situation a now crisis.
A now crisis.
Yeah, which is chilling. He was basically saying, we are no longer dealing with theoretical future threats. The whole architecture of global deterrence is fracturing today.
Yeah, and the historical context Dr. Kadlich provided really illuminates the mechanics of this crisis, I think. He pointed out that for the first time in the history of the United States, the country is facing 2 nuclear peer competitors simultaneously.
At the exact same time.
Right. China is currently engaged in this historically unprecedented expansion of its nuclear arsenal. And at the same time, Russia already holds the world's largest nuclear arsenal and, continues to modernize its delivery systems.
Plus, you've got North Korea in the mix.
Exactly.
Their ballistic missile capabilities have advanced to the point where they can now reliably reach the American homeland.
Yeah.
So for the last 30 years, the U.S. strategy of stockpile stewardship was built on a very specific foundation, which was maintaining a deterrent against one primary adversary in a relatively stable environment.
Right, just one.
It's kind of like doing basic maintenance on an old house in a quiet neighborhood. You patch the roof, you fix a leaky pipe, and you're good. But now it's like waking up and realizing the neighborhood has suddenly become a war zone.
That's a great way to put it.
And now you have to play a high-stakes game of chess against 2 grandmasters at the exact same time, while a third player is just throwing darts at the board.
Right. The dart thrower being North Korea in this scenario. It's chaotic. And the underlying math of nuclear deterrence, it fundamentally breaks when you introduce a second peer competitor.
How so?
Well, during the Cold War, sizing the U.S. arsenal was relatively straightforward, right? You needed enough survivable weapons to guarantee a devastating response to a Soviet first strike.
Just the Soviets.
Exactly. But if you are facing Russia and China simultaneously, defense planners have to ask a genuinely terrifying question. If we exhaust a portion of our arsenal, or, God forbid, responding to one adversary, do we have enough left over to deter the other from taking advantage of our depleted state?
Oh, man. So the geopolitical weight on the system has basically doubled.
Right.
But the U.S. Foundation was only ever built to support one major adversary. So the officials in this hearing were arguing that the luxury of deferring hard decisions is just gone. The U.S. has to act with extreme urgency and even accept some financial and developmental risks to prevent a future where the country is subjected to nuclear coercion or blackmail from a combined axis of adversaries.
And as you might expect, unprecedented threats come with unprecedented price tags.
Yeah, and that reality generated some of the most intense friction in the entire hearing, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A 35% budget hike is just enormous. And Ranking Member Moulton, he thoroughly grilled Undersecretary Williams on this specific increase.
Oh, he really went after him.
He did. He pointedly asked, quote, "What exactly are you buying for $7 billion?"
Right. And the initial list Williams provided didn't immediately sound like it justified that kind of astronomical figure.
Not at all.
I mean, I try to look at this from the perspective of the average taxpayer, right? I look at my own tax bill and I hear a government official say they need $7 billion for glove boxes and a training center at the Savannah River site.
Sounds a bit wild.
It sounds absurd on its face. Like, I'm sorry, how is it physically possible to spend $7 billion on glove boxes and a training facility?
Right. It sounds like you're buying standard lab equipment at a massive markup. But you have to look at the mechanics of what a Class 1 nuclear facility actually requires. When Williams talks about glove boxes for accelerating plutonium pit production, he isn't talking about, like, a plexiglass box in a high school chemistry lab.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. For context, a plutonium pit is literally the hollow spherical core that triggers the primary nuclear detonation in a warhead. I mean, it is the heart of the weapon.
So we're talking about handling weapons-grade plutonium, which requires interacting with some of the most volatile and dangerous material on the planet.
Exactly. These glove boxes are massive, multi-ton enclosures. They're constructed from highly specialized stainless steel and lined with extremely heavy shielding to protect the workers from alpha radiation.
Right.
But the real cost isn't just the steel. It's the engineering required for the environment itself. These facilities use incredibly complex, multi-million-dollar negative pressure ventilation systems.
Negative pressure?
Yeah, so the air pressure inside the box has to be constantly maintained at a lower level than the room outside. That way, if a microscopic fissure ever develops in the seal, the air rushes into the box, preventing deadly radioactive particles from escaping out into the facility.
Wow. So a single microscopic failure isn't just a maintenance issue.
No.
It's a catastrophic radiological event that shuts down the entire production line.
Precisely. And furthermore, these buildings require profound seismic isolation.
Earthquakes.
Right. They have to withstand major earthquakes without compromising those negative pressure seals. So when Undersecretary Williams was defending the cost, he actually invited the committee members to physically visit Savannah River to comprehend the sheer scale of the engineering.
Seeing is believing, I guess.
Yeah. And he also provided a vital historical defense, which I thought was interesting. Back in the early 1960s, during the peak of the Cold War nuclear buildup, the weapons enterprise consumed about 6% of the entire Department of Defense budget.
6%.
Today, even with this massive 35% increase we're talking about, it only accounts for about 3%.
That does put it in perspective. So the U.S. isn't just ordering new weapons off an existing assembly line. The factories that actually make the components, they aged out decades ago.
Long gone.
Right. So the country is being forced to entirely rebuild a decayed generational manufacturing infrastructure, basically from scratch. But I guess building $7 billion facilities is pretty pointless if the delivery systems meant to carry these weapons are falling apart.
Good point.
Which brings us to the actual hardware.
Yes, the hearing heavily focused on modernizing the nuclear triad.
Right. For those who might not know, the triad is the three-pronged delivery system consisting of bombers in the air, intercontinental ballistic missiles on land, and submarines in the sea.
The three legs of the stool. And General White provided some rapid-fire updates during the hearing, starting with the air leg, which is the new B-21 Raider stealth bomber.
Right. General White confirmed the military secured 2 more low-rate initial production lots. and they struck an agreement with Northrop Grumman to boost their annual production capacity by 25%.
Yeah, and for anyone unfamiliar with defense acquisition terms, a low-rate initial production lot is this deliberate, highly monitored early manufacturing phase.
It's testing the waters, right?
Exactly. Instead of immediately building 50 bombers and then, discovering a massive structural flaw in all of them, the military builds a small handful. They fly them, they test them, they hunt for systemic bugs, and they refine the manufacturing process before committing to full-scale mass production.
That makes sense.
The B-21 program is moving through this phase successfully, apparently, aiming for a fleet of at least 100 aircraft. And the first delivery to Ellsworth Air Force Base is on track for 2027.
Which is coming up fast. Then there is the land leg, the Sentinel ICBM program.
Big one.
Yeah, this is the monumental project to replace the ancient Minuteman III missiles that are sitting in silos across the American Midwest right now. General White noted they're advancing toward a major developmental milestone by the end of 2026, with the first physical missile pad launch scheduled for 2027.
Missile moving fast.
But what really stood out in the testimony regarding the Sentinel was Representative Moulton praising the plan to use an open architecture software framework.
Oh, yeah?
He specifically said this was to avoid what he called another F-35 debacle.
Yeah, that was a very pointed reference. The F-35 fighter jet program became infamous in defense circles for locking the military into a proprietary system.
Right.
The underlying software and hardware integration were so tightly controlled by a single contractor that the military couldn't even upgrade a basic sensor without paying that original company exorbitant fees.
It's exactly like buying a complex electronic toy that has been completely superglued together by one specific, very expensive company.
That's a perfect analogy.
Like if a piece breaks or, you just want to install a better battery, you literally can't take the toy apart yourself. You have to send it back to that one company and they can charge you whatever they want because you have zero alternative options.
Right, and open architecture changes that entire procurement dynamic. It's more like building with Legos.
Legos, I like that.
The military designs and owns the base plate. They set the strict data standards and the physical parameters for how the pieces must snap together. And because the framework is open, any defense contractor can manufacture a new Lego brick.
Oh, I see. Whether it's a new targeting sensor or a guidance module.
Exactly. It allows the government to easily swap out obsolete pieces, and crucially, it forces different companies to constantly compete against each other to provide the best upgrades, which significantly drives down long-term costs.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of budgets and costs, we also saw a fascinating bureaucratic paradox discussed during the hearing.
The SLCMN.
Yes, the Sea-Launched Cruise Missile, or SLCMN program. This is a tactical nuclear theater weapon designed to be launched from attack submarines. And when you look at the budget request for fiscal year 2027, there are exactly $0 allocated to it. Zero.
$0. Yet, when pressed by the committee, multiple administration and defense officials, including Undersecretary Williams and Dr. Kadlec, confirmed they are fully committed to the program.
They even stated the SLCMN is running ahead of schedule.
Yeah, which is pretty wild.
The program with $0 in the budget running ahead of schedule sounds like government magic. I mean, how does that mechanism actually work?
Right. Well, it comes down to something called reconciliation funding. The federal budget process is incredibly complex, as you know, and sometimes Congress appropriates funds in a previous legislative cycle that don't get entirely spent in that specific fiscal year.
Like rollover minutes on an old cell phone plan?
Kind of, yeah. The agencies are legally utilizing this existing carryover pool of money to keep the development of the missile's W-85 warhead moving forward rapidly. So a $0 request for one specific fiscal year does not mean a program is dead, not if they have flexible funding already in the bank carrying them through the development phase.
Got it. And speaking of the sea leg of the triad, Dr. Kadlec highlighted a structural change that creates a massive ripple effect across the entire military.
This is a big deal.
It is. The Navy is currently replacing its aging Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines with the new state-of-the-art Columbia-class submarines. However, the new Columbia-class boats will physically have fewer missile launch tubes than the older Ohio-class boats they are replacing.
Yeah, and this creates a severe capacity deficit. Going back to our stool analogy, think of the nuclear triad as a three-legged stool, supporting the weight of U.S. global deterrence. If the sea leg of that stool suddenly gets shorter because there are physically fewer tubes available to launch missiles.
The stool becomes unstable.
Exactly.
Especially when the geopolitical weight dropping on top of that stool, which is represented by China and Russia's combined arsenals, is getting heavier by the day.
Right. So the defense officials confirm they are having to recalculate procurement quantities across the entire triad to compensate for this.
Rebalancing everything.
Exactly. If the submarine fleet carries fewer total missiles, the military might be forced to build more B-21 stealth bombers, or maybe deploy more Sentinel land-based missiles, just to keep the overall strategic numbers balanced and maintain parity with adversaries.
But, all of these new bombers, these open architecture missiles, and Class 1 manufacturing facilities, they mean absolutely nothing if you don't have the human beings to build them, to test them, and to authorize their use.
Human element.
Right. And the conversation about the human element revealed a major bottleneck in the timeline. You can't just take a commercial pipe fitter or a standard electrician and drop them into a Class 1 nuclear facility.
No. Absolutely not. The security clearances alone take months, if not years, to process. Furthermore, the extreme tolerances required, like, say, welding a seam that will be exposed to radiation and negative pressure for 50 years, that requires specialized training that most standard trade schools simply do not teach.
And the current specialized workforce is aging out rapidly.
Fast. Officials testified that they are partnering heavily with community colleges, like Roane State in Tennessee, and university programs, like Purdue's Infrastructure Innovation Lab, to literally build the next generation of nuclear workers from the ground up.
It's a massive undertaking, and the human cost of this nuclear pivot led to what I think was the most historically heavy and really emotionally charged exchange of the entire hearing.
Without a doubt.
Representative Vasquez from New Mexico engaged directly with Undersecretary Williams regarding the deeply sensitive issue of the downwinders.
Yeah. And for those listening who might not be familiar, the downwinders refers to the thousands of American citizens, largely New Mexico, who were exposed to deadly radioactive fallout from the Trinity test,
which was the very first above-ground nuclear detonation conducted in July of 1945.
Right. At the time of the Trinity test, the military did not fully understand the long-term atmospheric patterns of nuclear fallout.
They just didn't know.
No. So the radioactive ash drifted over civilian populations, poisoning local water supplies and settling on crops. And during the hearing, Representative Vasquez outlined the devastating historical impact of that event. He detailed the rare cancers, the chronic illnesses, and the generational health effects that local communities are frankly still suffering from today.
Yeah, it was heavy. And we want to make sure we're just impartially laying out exactly what was said here because it's a very charged topic. Vasquez used this history to make a very specific demand regarding modern defense policy.
He did.
He pointed out that today, the NNSA conducts over 1,000 advanced, non-explosive laboratory and supercomputer tests every single year to ensure the nuclear stockpile is safe and effective.
Right, without blowing anything up.
Exactly. His argument was that given our current cutting-edge technology at national laboratories like Los Alamos and Sandia, a return-to-live, explosive, above-ground testing would be a catastrophic step backward for the environment and for public health.
And he demanded that Undersecretary Williams definitively rule out any return to above-ground testing by the United States.
And Williams's response? It was deeply personal yet bureaucratically unyielding, wouldn't you say?
Yes, that's exactly how I would describe it. Williams shared that his own father was actually a downwinder.
Wow.
Yeah, his father was living in Roswell, New Mexico during the time of the 1945 fallout. So he openly acknowledged this profound personal connection to the history that Vasquez was describing.
But despite that personal history, Williams refused to definitively rule out future live testing.
Right. He stated unequivocally that only the President of the United States holds the executive authority to make the decision to recommence nuclear testing.
So his hands are tied.
Basically. As an appointed official, he operates in service to the President's directives, and, he just cannot bind the Commander-in-Chief's future options. While he emphasized that the current stockpile is absolutely ready and effective without live detonations, he just would not take the option off the table.
It's a tough spot. And I feel like this exchange perfectly encapsulates the ultimate tension underlying everything discussed in this hearing. On one side, you have the defense establishment pushing for maximum, unquestionable global deterrence in a rapidly degrading security environment.
Right. They want adversaries to have absolute certainty that the American arsenal functions perfectly. And sometimes, unfortunately, live testing is viewed as the ultimate demonstration of that capability.
Yeah. But on the other side, you have the very real historical and human realities on the home front. The legacy of past testing is not abstract history, It is still actively impacting the health of American citizens today.
It really is. And if we step back and look at the entirety of this budget request and the accompanying testimony, I think the overarching theme is undeniable.
The U.S. is at a crossroads.
A profound historical inflection point. The post-Cold War era of quietly stewarding the weapons we already have has concluded. It's done. The government is rapidly trying to rebuild a massive, incredibly expensive nuclear production machine to face off against a new reality of multiple nuclear-armed adversaries.
Which brings us to perhaps the most unsettling reality of this entire pivot. We know the current legacy systems, the Minuteman III silers, the aging bombers, they are already decades past their intended lifespans.
Decades.
And we also know that the new systems, the open architecture Sentinel missiles, the B-21s, the complex plutonium pit facilities, they require an entirely new workforce and infrastructure that is essentially just starting to be built.
Which raises an incredibly important question for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Yeah, what's that?
If the old foundation is crumbling, and the new foundation will take years, if not a whole decade, to fully pour and cure, what happens to global security in the gap years?
Oh, wow.
Right. How does the United States safely navigate the highly vulnerable window of time before this new American arsenal is actually built, tested, and ready to deploy?
The gap years. A multi-billion-dollar gap in our global security. I mean, that is a terrifying window of time to think about.
Truly terrifying.
Well, that is certainly something for everyone to mull over. That's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us on Caught on the Hill. We'll catch you next time.